prove that root 2 is irrational. We're going to do proof by contradiction, so write that down. Proof by contradiction. So we suppose that the opposite is true. So we're going to suppose that root 2 is rational. Suppose that root 2 is rational. I'm going to need a full definition of this, and you will see why later. So what that means is, if root 2 is rational, then that means root 2 equals p over q. So p and q need to both be integers. The bottom one cannot be 0, q cannot be 0 because you can't divide by 0, and also I'm going to say that this is written in its simplest terms, so p and q have no common factors other than 1. We will need this. Okay, so we're saying that root 2 is a rational number, and it's written as a fraction. It's written as a ratio of two numbers, and the fraction is in its simplest form. Right, so root 2 equals p over q. If we square both sides, that would say 2 equals p squared over q squared. Right, so then if we can make p the subject, which would be easier than making q the subject, multiply through by q squared. That would say 2q squared equals p squared. So p squared equals 2q squared, right? Well, that means p squared is even because this is 2 times integer. We know that q is an integer, so q squared, and we know q is not 0. Q squared must also be an integer, so 2 times that integer must be even. So that tells me p squared is even. Now, if p squared is even, the only way p squared can be even, if you think about p squared as p times p, well, p must also be even, because odd times odd isn't going to get you an even number, is it? So that means p is even. Okay. Right, so if p is even, then that means p can be written as 2k for some integer k. Okay, so now if we just rewrite this p squared equals 2q squared, so that would be, we just write this again down here. Then p squared equals 2q squared. If we just replace p with 2k, so 2k squared equals 2q squared, or 2k squared is 4k squared. 4k squared equals 2q squared, right? So if we just make q squared the subject of that, that means q squared would be 4k squared over 2, which would mean that q squared equals 2k squared.